Well, we got some absolutely stunning and horrible news out of Alabama. I want to bring in Aaron Parnas, our legal expert, to break it down for us. Aaron, what's the news?
Yeah, Luke, we had a crazy Supreme Court decision out of the Alabama Supreme Court, which held that non-implanted fertilized embryos are considered to be humans under Alabama state law. Now, the backstory to this case is pretty crazy. You had a couple who fertilized several embryos back in 2020. Then they were stored at a cryogenic chamber in a hospital. That hospital mishandled the embryos. An unauthorized employee essentially went in and was toying around with the embryos and dropped them, causing them to be no longer viable. That couple then sued the hospital, saying that the hospital should be liable for wrongful death. And the trial court essentially said, absolutely not. Embryos are not considered to be humans, even if they are fertilized, because A, they were never implanted in the first place, but B, these are not living, breathing children. The Supreme Court, however, in a 7-2 opinion, disagreed and said that embryos are now considered to be humans under Alabama's wrongful death statute.
So explain for the audience the reasoning, the explanation from the Supreme Court of Alabama as to why this was the decision they made.
Yeah, it's a pretty crazy explanation coming out of the Supreme Court. And the explanation really focuses on the Alabama Constitution, which cites God a number of times and was really based on biblical readings, but also cites several biblical figures like Jeremiah and others to kind of get to the point where fertilized embryos are considered to be humans. The reasoning was based on theology rather than actual precedent or actual law. It really is a scary opinion if you read it.
And then walk us through what are the ramifications of this going forward?
I think the biggest, well, there are a couple ramifications. The biggest ramification is the fact that IVF clinics in Alabama are now going to be scared of potentially conducting more procedures and treatments simply because now they can be sued under the wrongful death statute in the event something happens with the procedure or the embryos or really anything. I mean, the power can go out, right? And an embryo could, for some reason, no longer be viable. And now that clinic can be sued. So that's number one. And IVF clinics will likely be forced to shutter their doors in Alabama and potentially elsewhere if other states adopt this. Number two is this really demonstrates the far right's assault on reproductive rights, the next step. They first came after abortion rights, and we saw that with the Supreme Court decision in Dobbs, and now they're coming after IVF treatments. And if this is applied elsewhere, you're going to see a mass push to potentially even eliminate IVF treatments or treat embryos, fertilized embryos, as though they are humans. This has been a major debate in the pro-life community, and we are seeing it come to fruition in Alabama right now.
And then what's next for this case?
Yeah, so I think what you're going to see here, so it was a 7-2 opinion, 2 dissenting justices, 7 in the majority. I think you'll see the case appealed to the United States Supreme Court. I don't know if the Supreme Court is going to take the case or not because the Supreme Court only takes about 100 cases per year. But this is an interesting case in the reproductive sphere. You could see the Supreme Court potentially taking it. But as far as what happens in Alabama, the wrongful death suit against this hospital can move forward now. And IVF clinics in Alabama are going to be thinking twice about whether to conduct IVF treatments moving forward.
And then you discussed the implications for IVF specifically of this decision. With this definition of human being worked with, play this out logically. What things outside of IVF does this impact as well?
Yeah, I mean, so now apparently if fertilized embryos are considered humans, then anyone can go and fertilize, say, 20 embryos and now have 20 tax deductions on their tax forms. They now have 20 extra COVID relief checks, $2,000 a pop. They now have a number, they now can claim that an embryo is a passenger and go in a HOV lane on a highway. There are just so many different implications. This really does open up Pandora's box in a lot of ways. Now, if you're watching this video and you're in Alabama, no, you can't do any of these things because this was a limited ruling simply related to the wrongful death statute. But you could totally see conservatives expanding this definition to include embryos in a number of scenarios, and it's a major issue that will, like I said, open up Pandora's box.
Right. And regardless of if any of those things were ever tried, it very accurately emphasizes the absurdity of this decision. Aaron, where can people find you?
On all my social media platforms at Aaron Parnas.